Welcome to the Rotary Time Show, a public service program presented by Rotary District 7610. On our programs, we talk with Rotarians and community leaders and discuss how Rotary International builds partnerships to support local, national, and world communities. I am your host, Rotarian Dr. Deborah Jackson from the Rotary Club of McLean, Virginia. On today's show, we will bring you a story of hope and resilience in the face of a disaster. Joining me remotely is Rotarian Mark Cooke, who will introduce us to the remarkable work of Rotary's ShelterBox organization, which provides life-saving aid when disaster strikes. Welcome, Rotarian Mark, to the Rotary Time Show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yes, and we're thrilled that you are able to do this given what's going on in the world. I know you've been quite busy, so I'm glad that we're able to squeeze you in and you give us the time that we can get you in to talk about this amazing organization. But before we do any of that, I'd like to have our audience know a little bit about the individuals. So I'm going to ask you to share briefly some of your background, your life, where you grew up, maybe your education, your career aspirations, those kinds of things.
All right, I'll be glad to. I grew up in Abilene, Texas, in the middle of West Texas, and started playing the trumpet as a child, and ended up after high school playing in the 1st Army Band in Fort Meade, Maryland, playing trumpet for 3 years. Trying to decide whether I wanted to major in music. I ended up going to Baylor for a couple of years and then transferred to University of Louisville to study with one of the greatest trumpet teachers in the world at the time, and got my bachelor's in trumpet performance, and then went on to the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville to get a master's in church music and trumpet performance. I was in the ministry for about 17 years. Before I switched careers and became a financial advisor, and just retired last year from owning my own financial firm out in Gainesville. I love making a difference in people's lives.
Oh, Mark, that's an amazing journey. When I too am a lover of music. Played in my band when I was in high school, but that's where I left it. I'm just here. That journey is very powerful. So thank you for sharing that. It does speak to who you are. So thank you. Tell us how you got involved at the Rotary Club of Gainesville in Haymarket, Virginia.
Well, it was around 2008. I had moved my office to Gainesville. My family, we lived in Manassas at the time. And I met some Rotarians and wanted to get involved and get to know my community better. So one of the office across the hall from me was a Rotarian, and he invited me to the Gainesville Haymarket Rotary Club, and I fell in love. And that was in 2008. And I've started out as sergeant of arms and then club administrator for about 12 years and been secretary of the club for the last 2 years.
All righty. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're in leadership. That means that you are moving up in the succession planning of your club to I'll hear your name soon as president. So it's good to hear. Tell us about your club. When does it meet? Where does it meet?
We meet on the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays for lunch in Haymarket at Giuseppe's Restaurant at 12:30. And we have about 44 members and very involved in our community with several pretty large grants, mostly focused on mental health and building communities, in building relationships in underserved communities around Manassas and Gainesville.
Perfect, perfect. I think a neighbor or two of my daughter who lives in the Haymarket area are also members of your club. So I'd heard about your club, just in my through my own daughter who was talking
Yeah,
about it. So I'm glad to know you're there. Maybe I'll get a chance to get there one day to visit your lunch.
we'd love to have you.
Yeah, your lunch club. I can make it happen and still be back down here in the Tyson's area before dinner. As the ambassador of ShelterBox, um, what is ShelterBox? Help our audience understand
Mhm.
what that is.
Well, ShelterBox is the official Rotary International partner for disaster and conflict relief. And it exists to ensure no one is without shelter after disaster or in conflict. We often work in places that others don't, making sure that we reach families who need support to take the next step in resuming their livelihoods. Everyone deserves a place to call home.
Hmm.
And right now, unbelievably, there's more than 100 million people around the world that have lost their homes to disaster and conflict. And we're working to change this by providing emergency shelter, tools, household supplies to displaced families after disaster. We enable families to begin to rebuild and recover, transforming despair into hope.
Yes, yes. And I think you all here in the States, I know after floods and hurricanes and some of those kinds of challenges, you're right on the spot with all of the tools and the shelters. And when you talk about a shelter, you're talking about, if I'm correct, the tent that is constructed that can house so many people. Is that correct?
Yes, that's our basic. We started with the tent and kitchen supplies and things and blankets to go with the tents. We're leaning more to do shelter kits now, which are easier to transport, which has a really strong toolkit, shovels, tarpaulins, fixings, wires, so people can fix up their homes if they've been destroyed. And so we're continuing to evolve over our 22 years.
Yes, you have. I recall, this is a side, but it's a brief story. As a high school principal, I had ShelterBox come and they set up in the auditorium, I'm sorry, the gymnasium. And the students who walked through were amazed at what, they saw and how it was being used. So are you all still
Yeah.
doing some of those tours?
Yes, we are. In fact, the high school out in our area, Kettle Run High School, has a tent up in their courtyard for over a month now, raising money for Shelter Box. And then
Wonderful.
I will set it up at district conferences and different places to let people see. The tent does bring in a lot of people of interest.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. So for any listening audience member, if you have as you said, a school that they can come and just sort of set up and
Hmm.
exposure, school, whatever, community center, whatever,
Right.
outdoors, indoors, it all works, right?
Yep.
Let's talk about the goals and the objectives now of ShelterBox. Can you help us understand those?
Sure. Well, our vision is a world where no family is without shelter after disaster. And our mission is to build awareness of global displacement and to facilitate providing families with life saving shelter and essential tools and supplies that will enable them to rebuild their homes and transform their lives. A lot of people think about food and water, but shelter is almost more important because if you don't have shelter, a place for safety and a place to feel at home and a place to cook, sometimes that's more important than food and water right after a major disaster.
Mhm. Can you share maybe a success story that we would appreciate hearing about what maybe because I'm sure you have many. You can just choose from one or two that you'd like to share with us.
Yeah, we could be here all day talking about the great displacement. But our first consignment of 143 boxes was sent to earthquake victims in India in January of 2001. And over the next 3 years, the project matured. And by the end of 2004, nearly 2,600 boxes had been dispatched following 16 major disasters.
Mhm.
But it was in December 26 of 2004 that news came of the devastating Indian Ocean tsunami, and ShelterBox faced its most significant challenge, one that would change its course forever. Donations and volunteers poured into ShelterBox and was able to ramp up operations on a scale unimaginable just 6 months earlier. In 2005, ShelterBox sent out more than 22,000 boxes, almost 10 times the number delivered the previous 3 years. And not only were we sending aid to survivors of the tsunami, but we were also able to help those who had lost their homes in Hurricane Katrina in the US and the massive earthquake that hit the Kashmir region of Pakistan. And in just a few short years, ShelterBox had emerged as a major player in the field of international disaster relief, responding to earthquakes, tsunamis, floods, typhoons, hurricanes, volcanoes, and conflict. And it all started with a club in Cornwall, England, just wanted to build a couple of tents.
Mhm.
And it's grown to this. It's just amazed me when I look at the history.
Yes, that is amazing. That is true. What is maybe some of your challenges that you face in getting these goods across the world?
Well, ShelterBox aims to get its supplies and a response team to the scene of a disaster as quickly as possible. We often begin planning the response within hours of a major disasters, but there's all kind of challenges when we do that. The exact time of delivery will depend on the circumstances, and we can only distribute aid within safe and achievable operational parameters. Chronic diseases such as such as conflict or famine, may have a slower response time as a crisis or disaster may evolve over a period before it reaches a stage where we can even bring in intervention. So every disaster or conflict is a little different, and we have to be very flexible. Where need is less clear, we may send a reconnaissance team in before any aid to see how much there is a need and whether the equipment will be suitable. And on each occasion, we will take advice from relevant bodies. However, our aim is always to provide immediate aid whenever possible. And because of the 22 years, we keep learning of how to meet these challenges, however and whenever they pop up.
Now, are you invited in? Does someone pick up a phone and call you and say, we need, or do you just reach out automatically and decide we're going to send a reconnaissance team out to see what's needed and then we're going to go with it?
Now, that's a great question, and it really can work either way. But the bottom line is we have to be invited in. A lot of times we'll reach out to countries and governments, telling them about, if they don't know about us, what kind of help we can be. But we do need to be invited. And we have shelter and equipment around the world ready to respond very quickly. So most times governments are very eager to invite us to come in to help.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're going to take a short break and we're going to come right back and talk more with Rotarian Mark Cooke, the ambassador for ShelterBox. Stay with us.
We've been here before, fighting the problems that fight back, because we see opportunities where others see obstacles. We're change makers and problem solvers, uniting over 1 million minds to address complex issues facing communities around the world, including yours. We're working together as partners and professionals, while making friendships that last a lifetime. We're Rotary, and there's no limit to what we can do.
Welcome back to the Rotary Times. We're here talking with Rotarian Mark Cooke from the ShelterBox organization out of Rotary International. Rotarian Mark, you are our true ambassador for the organization, and you've educated us in part one of our segment on some of the things that are very important, even up to the challenges and the achievements that you are able to get to. What collaborations are you involved with in terms of other organizations to ensure that you can have the best impact possible?
You know, I'm usually asked that every time I make a presentation, and I'm glad to say that we always work with partners in countries after a disaster, and especially in conflict zones. We don't send our shelter box response teams, who are volunteers, into conflict zones, which necessitates partners in that area. We started working in Syria, for instance, in 2012, and together with our trusted partner Relief Aid, we're providing families with tarpaulins and rope to reinforce their tents, helping people to keep a distance from each other. We have mattresses, carpets, thermal blankets, and kitchen sets. We can help keep families to stay warm and prepare meals. So every response, we have a partner. And most of the time, those partners, if available, are local Rotary clubs and then other NGOs in the area.
And that was a question I was going to ask you to follow up on. Your volunteers, are they Rotarians? And I think you've answered that, but are they not? Do you have other volunteers, maybe non-Rotarians, that also provide that service for you?
We do. Most of them are Rotarians, but not all. We have ShelterBox routine emergency response team members around the world, and a lot from the U.S. And most of them are Rotarians, but not all of them.
Okay. How does one get involved if they would like to be of some assistance to you here in the States, that is?
I love that question because there's always opportunities. There's room for more ambassadors like myself. We make presentations to Rotary clubs and other community organizations and raise money in support of ongoing projects. We have influencers. Those are people that share ShelterBox news and needs online through social media. And what I love to focus on is I would love to have every Rotary club have a club champion. It's just somebody that keeps your Rotary club informed about ShelterBox news and needs. We have change makers. These are people that provide special fundraisers to support our mission. And then there's a ShelterBox response team, which are volunteers who deliver our aid. And boy, I am so impressed with the response team members that I've met. Just their flexibility, knowing that they go into places they never dreamed of going at the drop of a hat, and they're ready to respond.
Now, a volunteer who can respond immediately, would that be someone who's a retiree or someone that's actively working? Describe your typical volunteer.
Well, I think the answer would be there's not a typical volunteer.
Okay.
I've met retirees. I've met younger people that have flexibility through their jobs, and their employers know that they love and support what they do because they can be gone for up to 2 weeks at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little of everything.
Do they have to have any kind of specialty? Are there requirements that they have some type of skill, a particular skill?
Yes, there is very, I would say, difficult in my mind training. In fact, I've heard, and this just blows me away, that out of 40 volunteers, only 1 or 2 might pass the training. As you can imagine, they're going to be put in very difficult situations, and sometimes could be dangerous physically and just out in the middle of nowhere. So we want to make sure that they're trained properly and that they're right people.
So the training that you offer, how long does that part of it take?
That's a great question that I actually can't answer. We have not had any new ShelterBox response team members since COVID, since the pandemic. They are just starting, from what I heard, to take new applications this fall. But because of that, they're revamping the training situation, and I can't tell you. I just know I'm impressed with everyone that I've met.
Well, I'm impressed just listening, and I also thought, oh, I don't know that I can do it if you're going to drop me in the middle of nowhere. That might not work for me either. Yep. But it's good to know that there are volunteers, individual volunteers out there who are willing to do just that. So that's
exactly
that's the good news. Talk about some of your upcoming projects and initiatives that you have in the works right now.
Well, the one you've probably heard of is Gaza.
Mhm.
There's over 1.7 million people displaced there. That's 70% of the population with no choice but to shelter in community buildings like schools, makeshift shelters, or out in the open. The number of people who have died since October now exceeds well over 27,000, including more than 10,000 children. And this number is rising all the time. Our goal is to provide emergency items like tarpaulins and rope to help people make damaged buildings and other shelters watertight. Blankets, mattresses, pillows, floor mats will help people stay warm. We're providing washing sets, water carriers, kitchen sets, and items like nappies, toothbrushes, and sanitary items. All vital items for people with no belongings and unable to return to their homes. Unfortunately, these items have not been able to be delivered yet because of the instability of the region. And we're working with a partner there, MAP, which is a medical aid for Palestinians, who have trucks loaded with our equipment ready to enter at the Rafah Pass as soon as it's safe. But we're still waiting on that.
Mm. If individuals like myself or my club, if I wanted to go back and talk about a special project, can we support you all in some of those things, the items you've just described? Is that?
Yes. Basically, any money coming from Rotary clubs or corporations or foundations goes to the general fund that helps wherever is needed. We just added, a lot of people that know ShelterBox know that many years ago you could designate where the tents go. Because we've grown so much, that's just not possible anymore. But we have a new hero club at the 10,000 level that you can actually take a special project that ShelterBox is working on and have that money go directly. But most of the money just goes to where it's needed the most. And right now, that's getting ready for Gaza.
Gotcha. So people can just go to your website or ShelterBox webpage.
Yeah, that is shelterboxusa.org to learn more about what we're doing.
Absolutely. I hope people will take the time to visit. What are your hopes and vision for the future of ShelterBox?
My hope is that in the next few years, ShelterBox will have the resources and volunteers to shelter 1 million people per year after the worst day ever in their lives. We've sheltered almost 3 million in 22 years. It took 15 years to get the first million and then 5 years to get the second million. This is a huge goal, but one the team at ShelterBox is actually actively pursuing. Personally, I want to present to every club in District 7610 and encourage them to become ShelterBox Club heroes.
Okay.
And District 7610 is usually in the top 10 districts of support in our nation, mainly because of my predecessor, Wayne Childs. I have big shoes to fill, but loving doing it.
And we all know Wayne, and I think
Yes.
that is manageable. I'm sure that our clubs would be more than happy to welcome you in to do that. So if they're watching, they know, just give you a call and will you bring out all of the equipment like you usually do, or you just come out and do a presentation?
I come out and bring visuals, bring a lot of the insides of the tents. I usually don't set up the tent because it takes a couple hours to do that. But I bring a lot of things to look at and a great presentation to let people know what we're all about.
Absolutely. Well, I look forward to at least sharing the information with my club. So get ready. We're going to have you out.
I love it.
That'd be great. If you had to say to those around us in the listening audience, if they had this passion to give back, and I don't mean financially, but just to give back in service, what message would you communicate on behalf of ShelterBox?
I would just say, get the word out. You know, people are always looking for places to invest their lives, their time, their talent. And ShelterBox, I think, is a great opportunity because they're so well respected around the world, both financially and what they do. And just share it with friends and get to know more about what ShelterBox is doing.
Yeah, because you're doing a lot. What's on the immediate agenda? Do you plan to do? I know the district meetings are coming up, or end of year, or district conference are coming up. Would you be presenting there? Is that someplace people might see you as well?
Could be. I usually try to do that, or some other person that I line up if I can't make the conference. And the other 2 or 3 districts surrounding us do not have ambassadors. So I would love, and we're working hard to find ambassadors to get the word out to more clubs.
No, that would be, well, let us know if our time here at Rotary, and especially the show, can help you with that initiative. We would love to do some special segment just for that, so we could go into further details about ShelterBox. That
Sounds great.
to kind of get that message and that word out. We would love to support you in that way. Well, we want to thank you for coming out today and saying yes to the ask. We've enjoyed hearing your story, the story of ShelterBox, and what we can do going forward to in a humanitarian way to support you.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Yeah, come on back and see us when you can. Okay.
I'd love to.
For the Rotary Times program, I am your host, Rotarian Dr. Deborah Jackson from the Rotary Club of McLean, Virginia. You're welcome to join us at a Rotary Club in your area for either breakfast, lunch, dinner, or service project. You can find a club near you by looking us up on the internet. Many clubs are hosting meetings in person, virtually, or in some hybrid format. You only need to look us up for details. Remember, our time is your time, and it's always time well spent. Please join us for our next program as we continue to celebrate Rotary's 117 years of service above self. Funding for this program is made possible by the generosity of Rotarian Lynn Heinrichs, State Farm Agency, McLean, Virginia.